Welcome to Lore of the Rings, where we explore the secret paths of Middle-earth and share the stories Tolkien never told. Before we dive in, take a moment to tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from and whether this tale has found you by day or by night. There is a twilight in Lothlorien that exists only in the mind's eye, a dusk woven not from the threads of Tolkien's published text, but from the silences between his words. Picture it now, the golden leaves of the Melian trees trembling in a breeze that carries neither warmth nor cold, only the weight of ages. Moonlight spills through the canopy like liquid silver, pooling on the forest floor in patterns that seem almost deliberate, as though the trees themselves were composing a language too ancient for mortal tongues. In this imagined hour, somewhere between the Fellowship's arrival in the Golden Wood and their departure down the Silver Lode, a meeting occurs. A conversation that Tolkien never set to paper, yet one that haunts the margins of his legendarium like a ghost refusing to fade. It is a meeting between two figures bound by a singular, terrible understanding. Frodo Baggins, the ring-bearer from the Shire, whose innocence is being slowly devoured by the burden he carries, and Galadriel, the Lady of Light, who once stood before that same abyss and chose, through will alone, not to fall. The air hums with unspoken words. Somewhere in the distance, the voices of the Fellowship drift through the trees, Sam's gentle humming, Legola's recounting ancient songs, the soft murmur of Aragorn speaking with Celeborn. But here, in this clearing where starlight seems to linger longer than it should, there is only silence and the rustle of leaves that have witnessed the rise and fall of kingdoms, the births and deaths of stars. Frodo stands alone, his hand unconsciously moving to the chain around his neck. The ring hangs there, heavier than iron, heavier than earth itself. He does not remember walking to this place. He does not remember deciding to leave the Fellowship's encampment. Yet here he is, and the forest seems to have been expecting him. Then she appears, not with fanfare or sudden revelation, but as though she had always been there, a part of the moonlight itself. Galadriel steps from between the trees, her presence both overwhelming and impossibly gentle. Her eyes, old beyond reckoning, hold the light of the two trees, and in that light Frodo sees both comfort and something far more terrifying, recognition. She knows. She knows what he carries, what it whispers to him in the dark hours before dawn. She knows because she has heard those same whispers, felt that same seduction promising dominion, promising an end to all suffering through the simple act of claiming what should never be claimed. "You came," she says, and her voice is neither question nor statement, but something in between, an acknowledgement of inevitability, as though this moment had been written in the stars long before either of them was born. Frodo opens his mouth to speak, but words fail him. What does one say to a being who has walked through 3 ages of the world, who knew the light of Valinor before darkness ever touched Middle-earth? What does one say to someone who understands the exact weight of the chain around your neck? The forest holds its breath. The leaves cease their rustling. Even the stars seem to lean closer, curious to witness what will unfold. This is the meeting Tolkien never wrote. This is the conversation that exists in the spaces between chapters, in the pauses between sentences, in the unspoken thoughts that Frodo carries with him from Lothlorien to the very fires of Mount Doom. And though we cannot find it in any published text, though no manuscript preserves its words, we sense its presence nonetheless. A gravitational pull in the narrative, a missing piece whose absence shapes everything around it. But what was spoken in that imagined twilight, beneath leaves that witnessed the first age and will witness ages yet to come? What truths passed between the hobbit who would save the world and the elf who chose not to rule it? And why, of all the scenes Tolkien might have written, did he leave this one in shadow? The answer, perhaps, lies not in what was said, but in what could not be said, truths too dangerous, too holy, too terrible to commit to the page. For some conversations occur not in words, but in the meeting of souls who have gazed into the same abyss and chosen, against all reason, to step back from its edge. The moonlight deepens. The moment stretches. And somewhere in the heart of the golden wood, a memory that never was begins to take shape, fragile as starlight, enduring as stone. But what was spoken in that imagined twilight, beneath the leaves that saw the first age? And why might Tolkien have chosen never to write it? To understand the silence, we must first understand what Tolkien actually wrote, and more importantly, what he chose not to write. The chapters concerning Lothlorien in the Fellowship of the Ring are among the most enigmatic in all of Middle-earth literature. They shimmer with an otherworldly quality, as though we are glimpsing events through a veil, seeing only shadows of deeper truths. Consider the canonical text. The Fellowship arrives in Kara's Galadhin exhausted, pursued by grief over Gandalf's fall in Moria. They are brought before the Lord and Lady of the Wood, and there, in that high flet among the Melian, something profound occurs. Galadriel speaks with each member of the Fellowship. We are told this explicitly, yet Tolkien records almost none of these conversations. We hear fragments only, her warning to Boromir, her testing of each heart. But of what passed between her and Frodo in those early hours, we are told almost nothing. Later comes the scene at the mirror, that haunting moment when Frodo offers Galadriel the ring and she refuses it, passing the test she has awaited through all the long years of her exile. This scene is recorded in full, every word preserved. Yet even here, Tolkien hints at depths unplumbed. After Galadriel's refusal, after her prophecy of diminishment and return to the West, the text tells us only that Frodo stood silent and that he felt as if he had been given much and had received much. What transpired in that silence? Tolkien was a master of strategic omission. Throughout his work, he deliberately withholds information, not from lack of imagination, but from profound understanding of how mythology functions. The most powerful moments are often those glimpsed obliquely, felt rather than described. In his letters, he speaks of leaving certain things veiled in mystery, because to explain them fully would be to diminish their power. But there is another reason for silence in Tolkien's work. Some truths are too dangerous to speak aloud, even in fiction. The ring represents a metaphysical evil so profound that to dwell too long on its temptations risks giving them power. Tolkien knew this. He experienced it himself while writing The Lord of the Rings, describing the work as a bitter and often terrifying experience, as though he were channeling forces he could barely control. Consider, then, what a full account of Frodo's inner experience in Lothlorien might reveal. We know from scattered passages that Frodo carries the ring with growing anguish. We know that Galadriel perceives things others cannot. She sees not just the physical ring, but the spiritual burden, the slow erosion of Frodo's will and hope. We know that she, of all beings in Middle-earth, understands the precise nature of his temptation. What would such a conversation look like? What could she say to him that Tolkien might have deemed too perilous to record? The text gives us clues. After the mirror scene, Frodo's demeanor changes. He becomes quieter, more withdrawn, but also strangely strengthened, as though he has been given knowledge that both burdens and sustains him. Sam notices this change but cannot name it. Aragorn sees it too, though he says nothing. Something happened in Lothlorien, something beyond what the Red Book preserves. Tolkien revised the Lothlorien chapters multiple times, more than almost any other section of the book. He added scenes, removed them, shifted dialogue, changed emphases. In early drafts, Galadriel's character was darker, more ambiguous. In later versions, she becomes luminous, tragic, deeply wise. What remains constant across all versions is the sense of hidden depths, conversations happening just beyond the reader's hearing, truths glimpsed but never fully revealed. There are moments in the published text where Tolkien explicitly tells us he is withholding information. Of what they spoke, little is recorded. He writes of certain conversations. The words are not remembered, he says of others. These are not casual omissions. They are intentional markers, signposts pointing toward untold stories. If Tolkien hid these moments, does that mean they never happened, or that they were too powerful to express in mere words? The question haunts every careful reader of The Lord of the Rings. For if we accept that Middle-earth exists as a coherent world with its own internal logic and history, then these unrecorded conversations must have occurred. The silence in the text is not absence but presence. The presence of something so significant that only silence can contain it. In the White Wood, where time moves differently, where past and future blur into an eternal present, what words passed between the ring-bearer and the lady? What did she see when she looked into his heart? What did he understand when he looked into hers? If Tolkien hid these moments, does that mean they never happened? Or that they were too powerful to express in mere words? The mirror of Galadriel is not merely a basin of water. It is a threshold, a boundary between what is and what might be, between the seen world and the realm of hidden things. When Frodo and Sam are led to that silver basin filled with water from the stream, they are being invited not just to see visions, but to participate in a kind of communion, a sharing of sight that binds them to Galadriel in ways that transcend ordinary speech. Consider the mechanics of the mirror as Tolkien describes them. It shows things that were, things that are, and things that yet may be. This is not simple prophecy or scrying. The mirror reveals the structure of time itself, the branching paths of possibility, the weight of decisions not yet made. To look into the mirror is to glimpse reality as the Valar see it, not as a linear progression, but as a vast, interconnected web of cause and consequence. Frodo looks and sees the Shire in danger, Lotho and the ruffians, the devastation that will come if evil is not stopped. He sees his task from a cosmic perspective, understands for the first time the true scope of what is at stake. Sam looks and sees his beloved gaffer thrown out of Bag End, the pain and loss awaiting him at home. Both are transformed by what they witness. But something else happens at the mirror, something Tolkien describes with unusual care. After Sam and Frodo have both looked, Galadriel herself speaks of the mirror's dangers. She warns that it can deceive, that not all visions come to pass, that to see the future can twist one's actions in the present. This is not casual wisdom. It is the voice of long experience, of one who has looked into the mirror countless times and borne the weight of foreknowledge. Then comes the moment that changes everything. Frodo, moved by compassion and perhaps by the ring's subtle influence, offers Galadriel the One Ring. He extends his hand. the chain glinting in the starlight, and speaks words that echo through all the mythology of Middle-earth. "You are wise and fearful and fair, Lady Galadriel. I will give you the one ring if you ask for it. It is too great a matter for me." Here, at this precise instant, two souls who have resisted the ring's ultimate temptation meet across a gulf of time and experience. Frodo, barely begun on his journey, already feels the burden beyond his strength. Galadriel, who has endured 3 ages of exile and waiting, faces the culmination of her long repentance. The ring whispers to both of them, promising fulfillment. To Frodo, release from responsibility. To Galadriel, the power to build a realm that would rival Valinor itself. And she refuses, but look carefully at how Tolkien describes her refusal. Galadriel does not simply say no. She undergoes a transformation, becoming briefly terrible and beautiful, a being of such power that Frodo can barely look upon her. She speaks her vision of herself as the Dark Queen, beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night, loved and feared by all. She shows him what she could become, and then, through sheer force of will, she steps back from that possibility. "I pass the test," she says, her voice diminishing, returning to its normal register. "I will diminish and go into the west and remain Galadriel." In that moment, something passes between them that transcends the offering and refusal of the ring. Frodo sees what it costs her to refuse. She sees what it will cost him to continue bearing it. They recognize each other, not as elf and hobbit, not as ancient and young, but as two beings who have stood at the same precipice and chosen the same terrible path. The path of willing sacrifice, of accepting diminishment rather than grasping power. The text tells us that afterward, Frodo feels as if a cloud had been lifted from him, that he perceives Galadriel with new clarity, seeing both her power and her humility, her greatness and her vulnerability. Sam, watching from the side, understands that something profound has occurred but cannot articulate what. He knows only that the lady was speaking the truth about herself, and that Frodo has been changed by witnessing it. But the mirror scene cannot be the end of their communion. Its intensity demands resolution, explanation, further speech. When two people have looked into each other's souls with such clarity, when they have acknowledged their shared burden so completely, can they simply part with formal words and courtesies? Does not such a moment cry out for continuation, for a quieter conversation in which the truths glimpsed in the mirror's reflected light can be spoken aloud? Tolkien gives us the public moment, the dramatic refusal, the prophecy of diminishment, the mutual recognition of burden. But what of the private moment that must follow? What words would pass between them when the formality of the mirror scene has ended, when they can speak not as lady and ring-bearer, but as two souls bound by the same terrible knowledge? The narrative structure of the Lithlorien chapters leaves space for such a moment. After the mirror scene, we are told that the Fellowship remains in Kara's Galadhin for some time, resting and regaining strength. Days pass, perhaps a month, though time moves strangely under the Malorn trees and no one can be quite certain. Frodo walks alone often, we are told, and Galadriel is frequently seen moving through the wood like a vision of starlight. Might they not have met again, away from the Fellowship, away from Celeborn and the watching elves? Might there not have been a conversation that Frodo, in recording his journey in the Red Book, chose to keep private, too personal, too painful, too sacred to share even with those he loved most? When the mirror's surface settles, what words linger unspoken between ring-bearers who have glimpsed each other's souls? Let us step into that quiet space, that unwritten moment where the narrative makes room for silence. The hour is late or early. Time has no meaning here in the golden wood where the days blend into each other like watercolors. Frodo has left the flet where the fellowship sleeps, unable to rest, the ring a cold weight against his chest. He walks without destination, letting the paths of Lothlorien guide him where they will. He finds himself in a small clearing he does not remember seeing before, though whether it is truly new or simply revealed to him now, he cannot say. The stars above shine with a clarity he has never witnessed, not even in the Shire on the clearest winter nights. They seem closer here, as though the very trees reach up to embrace them. "You cannot sleep," Galadriel says, and once again Frodo has the sensation that she did not arrive but was always present, woven into the fabric of the clearing itself. "No, lady," Frodo replies, and his voice sounds small to his own ears, not weak but humble, like a child confessing fear to a parent who will neither mock nor coddle but simply understand. She moves closer, and in the starlight her face is both young and infinitely old. "Neither could I, in the years after I first heard of the ring's finding. I would walk these woods as you walk them now, feeling the weight of choices not yet made, paths not yet chosen." Frodo looks at her, truly looks, and for the first time he allows himself to ask the question that has haunted him since the mirror. "How did you bear it? The temptation, I mean. When I offered you the ring, I felt..." He stops, unable to articulate the sensation. "I felt as though offering it was itself a kind of relief, as though by placing it in your hands I might finally rest." "Yes," Galadriel says softly. "That is its oldest trick. It promises rest, Frodo Baggins. It promises an end to the burden of choice, the weight of responsibility. Give me to one who is strong," it whispers. "Give me to one who is wise. Give me to one who will use me well, and you may at last lay down your burden." But you refused. There is wonder in Frodo's voice and something else, something like desperation. You were strong enough to refuse. Galadriel's smile is sad beyond measure. "I refused not because I was strong, Frodo, but because I have been weak. I have desired dominion. I have imagined myself as ruler of a realm that would rival the undying lands themselves. For 3 ages of the world I have nursed these desires, fed them, allowed them to grow. The ring showed me nothing I had not already imagined myself." She pauses, and the forest seems to pause with her, holding its breath. "That is why I could refuse," she continues, "because I know what I would become. You offered me everything I have ever wanted, and I saw with terrible clarity that the getting of it would destroy not just me, but all I truly love. Power is seductive, Frodo, precisely because it promises to protect what we cherish. But it protects nothing. It devours everything, and it begins by devouring the one who wields it." Frodo's hand moves unconsciously to the ring beneath his shirt. "Then how can I..." His voice breaks. "How can I continue bearing it, knowing what it will do to me? Already I feel it changing me, making me suspicious, making me treasure it even as I hate it. If you, with all your strength and wisdom, fear what the ring would make of you, what hope do I have?" Here is the crux of the unwritten conversation, the question that Tolkien could not allow to be fully answered, because to answer it would be to diminish the agonizing uncertainty that makes Frodo's quest so powerful. But Galadriel, in this imagined moment, offers what comfort she can. "You have one hope that I do not," she says, and her voice carries both gentleness and iron. You do not desire power, Frodo Baggins. You never have. The ring found in you the poorest soil for its seeds, a heart that wants only home, only peace, only the simple joys that great lords and ladies have forgotten how to treasure. That is why you were chosen, not because you are strong, but because you are unburdened by ambition. But I will fail, Frodo whispers. I feel it, lady. I will not be strong enough in the end. Galadriel places a hand on his shoulder, and her touch is cool and light as starlight. Perhaps you will fail, Frodo. Perhaps the ring will prove too strong at the final moment. But this, I promise you, every step you take toward its destruction is a victory against the darkness. Every moment you resist is a blow against the enemy. And if you should fall at the last, it will not be because you were weak, but because you were asked to bear what no mortal was meant to carry. The clearing seems to shimmer, and for a moment Frodo sees not Galadriel the elf lord, but someone far older, far greater. A vision of one who walked in Valinor before the sun and moon were made, who defied the valor themselves in her pride, who has spent millennia learning wisdom through sorrow. Will I survive? He asks, the question barely audible. Her answer is long in coming, and when it arrives, it carries the weight of foresight and the sorrow of inevitability. You will survive, Frodo Baggins. But you will not return unchanged. The wound you bear will never fully heal, not in this life. But is there something she could say here? Some warning or confession? That Tolkien could not allow her to speak. To understand why a private conversation between Frodo and Galadriel carries such weight, we must trace back through the long years of her history, a history written in sorrow, pride, rebellion, and hard-won wisdom. Galadriel is not merely an elf lord of great power. She is one of the Calaquendi, the high elves who walked in the light of the two trees before Morgoth destroyed them. She is among the oldest and mightiest beings remaining in Middle-earth, and her story is one of exile and redemption spanning more than 7,000 years. In the First Age, when the Noldor fled Valinor against the will of the Valar, Galadriel was among them, though Tolkien's accounts of her motivations vary across different texts. In some versions, she is a proud leader, eager to carve out realms of her own in Middle-earth. In others, she is more innocent, following her kin more from loyalty than ambition. But in all versions, one truth remains. She was banned from returning to Valinor, her pride earning her exile until she should prove herself worthy of pardon. 7,000 years. Imagine bearing such a sentence. Imagine watching the ages roll past, watching kingdoms rise and fall, watching friends and loved ones fade or fall in battle, all while knowing that you are barred from your true home because of choices made in youth. Galadriel endured the wars against Morgoth in the First Age, witnessed the drowning of Beleriand, saw nearly all of her kin perish or depart. She endured the forging of the Rings of Power and the revelation of Sauron's treachery. She stood against the Dark Lord through the Second Age and into the Third, her ring Nenya preserving Lothlorien against the decay of time, but also binding her fate to the One Ring's survival. Every day of those 7,000 years, she must have felt the weight of her choices. Every day, she must have asked herself, what would I do to return home? What would I sacrifice? What power would I claim if it meant ending this exile? The ring offers her exactly that. Not merely power for its own sake, but the power to create a realm so beautiful, so perfect, that it would rival Valinor itself. With the One Ring, she could make Middle-earth into a paradise, or what she, in her pride, might imagine as paradise. She could protect all she loves, defeat all enemies, ensure that no evil ever again threatened her people. She could, in effect, make herself a goddess, worshipped and beloved, her will absolute. And she refuses. The magnitude of this refusal cannot be overstated. For 7,000 years, she has desired exactly what the ring promises. For 7,000 years, she has imagined realms of her own making, power sufficient to protect and preserve. The ring is the culmination of every ambition she has nursed through the long ages of her exile. And when it is offered freely, not as a temptation, but as a gift from an innocent heart, she turns it away. This is the moment that earns her pardon. Tolkien makes this explicit in The Lord of the Rings. After refusing the ring, Galadriel's exile ends. She is at last permitted to return to Valinor, to see again the undying lands from which she was banned. The test she speaks of is not merely personal. It is cosmic, a judgment passed by the Valar themselves on whether she has learned humility, whether she has overcome the pride that drove her into exile in her youth. But what does such a test feel like from inside? What does it mean to face the ultimate temptation and choose against it, knowing that this choice will define not just your future, but your entire legacy? This is the knowledge that Galadriel carries when she speaks with Frodo. She understands his burden not abstractly, but intimately, viscerally. She knows what it feels like to desire the ring, to feel its promises resonating with your deepest longings. She knows the seduction of imagining oneself as savior, as the one strong enough and wise enough to wield absolute power without corruption. And she knows the terrible truth that Frodo is only beginning to learn. No one is that strong. No one is that wise. The ring corrupts not because it makes people evil, but because it promises to make them into the heroes they already imagine themselves to be. It offers the power to enact every good intention, to force the world into the shape of one's ideals. And that offer, precisely because it appeals to the good in us, is the most dangerous temptation of all. When Galadriel looks at Frodo in their private conversation, she sees herself, not as she is now, but as she was 7,000 years ago, proud, certain, convinced that she knew better than the Valar what was right and good. And she sees how easily that certainty leads to ruin. She cannot save Frodo from his burden, but she can offer him the one thing she wished someone had offered her in her youth: honest understanding, free of judgment or false comfort. She tells him not that he will succeed, but that his effort matters regardless of the outcome. She offers not reassurance but solidarity, the fellowship of those who have borne unbearable burdens and survived, even if scarred. And perhaps, in that private moment, she confesses something she has never spoken aloud. That even now, even after refusing the ring, part of her still wonders what she might have accomplished with it. That the temptation never fully leaves. That wisdom is not the absence of desire, but the daily choice to act against it. This is the gift she can give Frodo that no one else in Middle-earth could offer. The knowledge that he is not alone in his struggle, that the greatest and wisest have faced the same darkness and survived it. Not unscathed, never unscathed, but survived nonetheless. What truth might she reveal to Frodo that echoes all the way back to the First Age? To understand what Galadriel perceives in Frodo, we must look carefully at his state during the Fellowship's time in Lothlorien. On the surface, Frodo seems to have recovered from the hardships of the journey, the terror of the Nazgul, the knife wound at Weathertop, the horror of Moria and Gandalf's fall. He walks in the Golden Wood, speaks with members of the Fellowship, even smiles occasionally. To his companions, he appears to be healing, but Galadriel sees deeper. She sees the shadows that gather in his eyes when he thinks no one is watching. She sees how his hand moves unconsciously to the ring, how he touches it as one might touch a wound that refuses to heal. She sees the exhaustion that goes beyond physical weariness, a spiritual fatigue, a slow erosion of hope that no amount of rest can remedy. Most tellingly, she sees how Frodo begins to isolate himself. In the Shire, Frodo was known for his gregariousness, his delight in company and conversation. Even on the road from Bag End to Rivendell, he maintained connections with his companions, sharing their fears and hopes. But in Lothlorien, something shifts. He walks alone more often. He speaks less. When he does speak, his words carry a weight they did not before, as though each sentence costs him something precious. Sam notices this change but cannot understand it. He attributes it to grief over Gandalf, to the burdens of leadership, to the lingering effects of the Morgul blade. But Galadriel, with her ancient sight, perceives the true cause. The ring is beginning its real work. Not the sudden, dramatic corruption that turned Gollum into a twisted creature of darkness, but a slower, more insidious erosion. The kind that works not through violence but through whispers, through subtle shifts in perception and priority. The ring is teaching Frodo to treasure it. Even as he hates it, even as he longs to be free of it, part of him is beginning to view it as precious, as his precious. This is the ring's masterstroke. It makes its bearer complicit in their own corruption, turning them into willing guardians of the very thing that is destroying them. Galadriel sees all this and more. She sees that Frodo's kindness, his great strength, is also becoming a vulnerability. The ring works through pity, through mercy, through the reluctance to do harm. It will use Frodo's compassion against him, turning his greatest virtues into pathways for corruption. Already, she can perceive the seeds of what will happen on Mount Doom. Frodo will fail not because he is weak, but because he is too merciful, too human, too good to commit the final act of destruction. And yet, she also sees something that gives her hope, however fragile. Frodo has not yet given in to despair. He continues forward, step by step, even knowing that the burden grows heavier with each mile. He does not seek power or glory. He does not imagine himself a hero. He simply endures, asking for nothing save the strength to take one more step, to wake one more morning, to carry the ring one more day. This, Galadriel understands, is the truest form of courage. Not the bold charge into battle, not the dramatic stand against overwhelming odds, but the quiet determination to continue when all hope seems lost. It is a courage she recognizes because she herself has had to cultivate it through millennia of exile, through ages of watching everything she built threatened by forces she could not fully defeat. In their private conversation, she would speak to this courage. She would tell Frodo that she sees his light failing, that she knows the darkness is closing in, but that his persistence matters more than victory. She would offer no false promises of success, no guarantees that all will end well. Instead, she would give him what she wishes someone had given her in her darkest hours: acknowledgement. Someone to say, "I see your struggle. I see your pain. I see how much this costs you, and I bear witness." There is a kind of comfort in being truly seen, even especially when the seeing includes our failures and fears. Frodo has been hiding his growing despair from the Fellowship, afraid that if they knew how weak he felt, how tempted, how close to breaking, they would lose faith in the quest. But with Galadriel, he does not need to hide. She sees through him anyway, and her seeing is not judgment but kinship. "You are afraid," she might say to him in that quiet clearing, that the ring will claim you before you can destroy it. You are afraid that you will betray those who trust you, that you will fail in the one task that matters most. And you are right to be afraid, Frodo Baggins, because those things may indeed come to pass. But fear is not cowardice. To continue despite fear, that is the only courage that truly exists. She might tell him about the long nights in Lothlorien when she felt her own strength failing, when the preservation of the Golden Wood seemed too great a burden, when she wondered if she should simply surrender to the inevitable decay of time. She might confess that even elves, even the Calaquendi who walked in the light of the trees, know despair, and that wisdom lies not in avoiding despair, but in choosing to act despite it. And she might offer him one truth that no one else could speak with such authority. You will not emerge from this unchanged, Frodo. The wound you bear, physical and spiritual, will never fully heal. You will carry the scar of the ring for the rest of your days, and there will be times when the burden feels unbearable even after the quest is complete. But that scar will also be a mark of honor, proof that you bore what few others could have borne, that you gave everything you had to save a world that will never fully understand what you sacrificed. If she foresaw his wounds, did she also foresee the doom he could not escape? Now we arrive at the heart of what was never written, the reconstruction of a moment that Tolkien left in shadow, yet which the narrative seems to demand. We approach this not with arrogance, not claiming to add to the professor's work, but with reverence, attempting to understand what such a scene might have looked like if it had been written in his hand, with his voice, in the mythic cadence that defines all of Middle-earth. The night is deep, though in Lothlorien there is no true darkness. The stars shine with a radiance that seems almost tangible, as though one could reach up and gather their light in cupped hands. The Melian trees rise like cathedral pillars, their golden leaves singing softly in a breeze that carries the scent of a lanner and nifredil, flowers that bloomed in Lothien's footsteps in the elder days and have not been seen since outside these enchanted borders. Frodo walks alone, his feet following paths that seem to choose themselves. He does not question this. In Lothlorien, one learns quickly that the forest itself is alive, aware, benevolent but strange. If it leads him somewhere, there is a reason, even if that reason remains hidden. He emerges into a glade he has not seen before, a perfect circle of grass surrounded by ancient trees whose roots twist above the ground like the hands of sleepers reaching toward some half-remembered dream. In the center of the glade is a small fountain, so simple and natural it might have been formed by the earth itself rather than by any hand. Water wells from stone and falls in a silver ribbon, making no sound, as though even its music is too sacred to disturb the silence. And beside the fountain stands Galadriel. She is not dressed in the formal raiment she wore when the Fellowship first came before her in Celeborn. Tonight she wears a simple robe the color of twilight, and her hair falls unbound down her back like a river of light. She seems younger here, less like a queen and more like someone who has set aside the weight of ages for a few precious hours. Yet her eyes remain timeless, holding depths that make Frodo's heart ache with a longing he cannot name. "Frodo Baggins," she says, and in her voice is both welcome and sorrow. "I knew you would come." "Did you call me here, lady?" Frodo asks, though he already knows the answer. "The forest called you, and I asked it too," Galadriel replies. "There are words that must be spoken between us, words that cannot be said before the others, not because they are secret, but because they are too heavy to be witnessed. Some truths can only be shared in solitude. Frodo nods, understanding without fully comprehending. His hand moves to the ring beneath his shirt, that habitual gesture he has come to loathe, and he feels its weight like a stone tied around his neck, pulling him toward depths he dare not imagine. "I am afraid," he says simply. There is no point in pretense with her, no possibility of hiding what she already sees so clearly. "I know," Galadriel says, and she gestures to a root beside the fountain, a natural seat where the ancient wood has curved as if to offer rest. They sit together, the Lady of the Wood and the Hobbit from the Shire, and in that moment they are not elf and halfling but two souls sharing the same impossible burden. "When you offered me the ring," Galadriel begins, her voice soft as falling leaves, "I saw in that moment the culmination of 7,000 years of temptation. Everything I have desired, everything I have imagined building, everything I have denied myself in the long years of exile, all of it was suddenly within reach. One word from me, and it would have been mine." She pauses, and her eyes turn to the stars as though seeking guidance from lights that shone before the world was made. "But I also saw what I would become. Not immediately. That is the ring's deception. It promises that you will remain yourself, that you will use its power wisely, that you alone can be trusted with such might. But I have lived long, Frodo, and I have seen how power transforms even the best of intentions. I saw myself 1,000 years hence, ruling from a throne of shadow, believing still that I acted for good even as I crushed all who opposed me. I saw a world made perfect by force, where no one dared think thoughts I had not approved, where love itself became a kind of slavery." Frodo listens, barely breathing. He has heard her refusal before, witnessed her moment of terrible glory when she showed him what she might become. But here, in this private confession, he understands the depth of what it cost her. "I tell you this," Galadriel continues, turning her gaze back to him, "not to burden you further, but to give you a gift that I wish someone had given me when I was young and proud, the truth about power. It is not merely that absolute power corrupts absolutely, though that is true enough. The deeper truth is that power makes monsters of us by fulfilling our noblest dreams. If I had taken the ring, I would not have set out to become a tyrant. I would have sought only to protect, to preserve, to perfect. And in doing so, I would have destroyed everything I meant to save." She reaches out and places her hand over his, over the hand that so often reaches for the ring. Her touch is cool and gentle, and Frodo feels tears rising unbidden to his eyes. "You carry the same burden now," she says. "Every day, the ring whispers to you that you could use it for good. To save the Shire, to protect your friends, to end suffering. It shows you visions of all you might accomplish, all the evil you might prevent. And because you are kind, because you love deeply, these temptations wound you more gravely than they would wound one who loved less." "Then how can I resist?" Frodo asks, and his voice breaks. "If the temptation grows stronger the more I love, the more I wish to protect what I cherish, then am I not doomed from the start? Will I not, at the final moment, claim it for myself?" Here Galadriel's expression shifts, and Frodo sees in her face a complexity of emotions he cannot fully parse. Sorrow and hope, certainty and doubt intertwined so thoroughly that they become inseparable. "I cannot tell you that you will succeed," she says, and her honesty is both cruel and kind. "I cannot promise that you will cast the ring into the fire, that your will shall prove strong enough at the ultimate test. The future is not written, Frodo. even for those of us who have looked into mirrors that show things yet to come. But I can tell you this, whether you succeed or fail in the final moment, every step you take toward Mount Doom is a victory against the darkness. Every day you do not claim the ring, every hour you resist its whispers, you are accomplishing what the enemy believed impossible. She withdraws her hand, and Frodo feels the absence of her touch like a cold wind. There is a strength in small things, Galadriel says, and now her voice carries something that might almost be wonder. Saruman does not understand it. Sauron cannot conceive of it. Even Gandalf, I think, hoped for it more than he truly believed in it. But I have seen it now, and it gives me more hope than all the armies and powers of the mighty. The strength of simple goodness, asking for nothing, claiming nothing, desiring only to go home and tend a garden. But I am not that strong, Frodo protests. Already I feel the ring changing me, making me suspicious of even Sam, making me covetous of this terrible thing I am supposed to destroy. How can such weakness save anyone? Because it is not weakness, Galadriel says firmly. To know your own frailty, to confess your fear, to continue despite having no certainty of success. This is not weakness, Frodo Baggins. This is the truest courage that exists in all of Arda. The Valar themselves could learn from you. She rises, and Frodo rises with her. The fountain continues its silent song. The stars continue their ancient watch, and somewhere in the distance, a nightingale begins a melody that speaks of longing and loss and beauty that endures beyond all sorrow. I cannot make your burden lighter, Galadriel says, and now there are tears in her eyes, starlight reflecting in silver trails down her ageless face. I cannot promise you will be unchanged by what you carry. The wound you bear, the wound from the Morgul blade and the deeper wound of the ring itself, these will mark you forever. You will never fully return to the innocent hobbit who walked out of the Shire. That Frodo is already gone, and he will not come back. Frodo feels something breaking inside him at these words, some last hope he had clung to without knowing he held it. But strangely, the breaking does not destroy him. Instead, it feels like a release, the letting go of an illusion that had been weighing him down. But, Galadriel continues, and her voice now carries a note of fierce certainty. The Frodo you will become, scarred and changed, will be someone who has seen the worst darkness and chose light anyway. Someone who bore what could not be borne and survived. Someone whose very wounds become testament to love's endurance. That Frodo, the one forged in the fires of Mordor and the shadows of the ring, will be more precious to those who love you than 100 innocent hobbits untouched by sorrow. She places her hands on his shoulders, and Frodo feels the weight of ages in that touch, the weight of wisdom earned through suffering, of strength built upon acknowledged weakness, of hope maintained despite every reason for despair. I give you now a gift that cannot be held in hand or stored in pack, she says. I give you my witness. I see you, Frodo Baggins. I see your fear and your courage, your weakness and your strength, your despair and your perseverance. I see how much this costs you. I see the darkness gathering around you. And I bear witness that you continue anyway. Let that witness be a light to you in dark places when all other lights go out. Then she does something unexpected. She bows to him. Galadriel, ancient and mighty, lady of Lothlorien, who walked in Valinor before the sun and moon, who defied the Valar and lived through 3 ages of the world. She bows to Frodo Baggins of the Shire. What you attempt may prove impossible, she says softly. But the attempt itself is worth more than all the power I refused. Go with my blessing, Ringbearer. Go with the knowledge that someone understands. And if, in the darkest moment, you feel utterly alone, remember this night. Remember that once, in a glade in Lothlorien, you were truly seen, and you were found worthy. The tears flow freely down Frodo's face now, and he cannot speak. But he does not need to. In the language of shared sorrow and mutual understanding, everything necessary has been said. The moment stretches, held in amber, two figures in a forest glade, silhouetted against starlight, bound together by the knowledge of what it means to bear burdens too heavy for mortal or immortal strength alone. Then Galadriel steps back, and the formal distance returns. She is once again the Lady of the Wood, remote and radiant. But Frodo knows now what lies beneath that distance. A heart that has known his same struggle, a will that has faced his same temptation, a spirit that has chosen his same terrible path. "Return to your companions," she says gently. "They will wonder where you have wandered." "And Frodo," she pauses, and her eyes hold his one last time. "When you reach the end, whatever end you find, know that I will be waiting in the west to welcome you home." She turns, and the shadows of the Melian trees embrace her, and she is gone, or perhaps was never there at all, save in the way that truth is always there, waiting to be perceived. Frodo stands alone beside the fountain, the stars overhead and the ring heavy against his chest. But something has shifted. The burden has not lessened, but he carries it differently now, not as a shameful secret, but as a sacred trust, witnessed and acknowledged. He begins to walk back toward the flet where Sam and the others sleep, and as he walks, he touches the ring one final time. But this time, the touch is different. This time, it is a warrior acknowledging the weapon he must carry into battle, a weapon that might destroy him, but whose wielding might save the world. But what gift does she entrust to Frodo here, one never written in the Red Book? In the published text, Galadriel gives Frodo one tangible gift: the phial containing the light of Eärendil's star, the same light that guided mariners through darkness, that was itself made from the last fruit of the two trees before Morgoth destroyed them. It is a gift of immeasurable power and significance, one that will save Frodo's life in Shelob's lair and light his path through the darkest places of his journey. But what if there was another gift, one that could not be contained in crystal, one that worked not through radiant light but through invisible grace? What if Galadriel, in that private meeting, bestowed upon Frodo something that operated at the level of spirit rather than matter, a blessing that would shape his choices in ways even he would not recognize? Tolkien's mythology is suffused with the concept of grace, not as overtly religious doctrine, but as a fundamental force in his created universe. The grace of the Valar touches certain moments, certain choices, guiding events toward eucatastrophe, that sudden turn toward joy that Tolkien believed was the highest function of fairy tales. We see this grace in Bilbo's unexplained mercy toward Gollum, in the chance meeting that brings Gandalf and Thorin together, in the eagle's arrival at the Black Gate. Could Galadriel, as one who had walked in Valinor and known the Valar themselves, serve as a conduit for such grace? Could she, in recognizing Frodo's desperate need, invoke a blessing that would work invisibly throughout his journey, strengthening not his body but his capacity for mercy, the very quality that would, in the end, save everything? Consider the critical moment on Mount Doom. Frodo fails. He claims the ring for himself, declares himself its master, and puts it on his finger. In any rational analysis of the story, this is the moment of absolute defeat. The quest has failed. The enemy has won. Yet through a chain of events set in motion by Frodo's earlier mercy toward Gollum, Mercy that seemed foolish, that Sam questioned, that even Frodo himself struggled to understand. The ring is destroyed anyway. Gollum bites off Frodo's finger, claims the ring, and in his moment of triumph stumbles into the fires of Mount Doom, taking the ring with him into destruction. The world is saved not through Frodo's strength, but through his earlier compassion, through his decision, made again and again despite every reason to choose otherwise, to spare Gollum's life. Where did that mercy come from? Frodo is naturally kind, yes, but the mercy he shows Gollum goes beyond natural kindness. It is maintained despite Gollum's treachery, despite the growing burden of the ring, despite Sam's reasonable objections and Frodo's own increasing paranoia. It is mercy that makes no sense, that serves no apparent purpose, that seems to place the entire quest in jeopardy, unless it was not entirely Frodo's own mercy. Unless it was strengthened, sustained, made possible by a grace granted in a moonlit glade in Lothlorien, when Galadriel placed her hands on his shoulders and spoke a blessing that Tolkien never recorded in the Red Book. What might such a blessing have sounded like? Perhaps something like this. Frodo Baggins, bearer of burdens too great for your strength, I invoke upon you the memory of starlight. When you walk in darkness, when the weight of what you carry crushes all hope, when you stand before choices that will break you regardless of how you choose, remember the stars that shone before the sun, before the moon, before shadow entered the world. Let their light kindle in your heart a mercy that transcends reason, a compassion that survives even despair. Or perhaps simpler in the manner of the old blessings, may you find strength to show mercy when mercy seems folly. May you hold to pity when pity wounds you. May you forgive when forgiveness costs everything. For in the end, it is not the strong who save the world, but the merciful. This blessing would not be magical in the sense of a spell or enchantment. It would not control Frodo's will or predetermine his choices. Rather, it would be an infusion of grace that made possible what would otherwise be impossible, the maintaining of compassion in the face of ultimate corruption, the choice to spare rather than kill, even when killing seems the only sane option. Throughout The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien emphasizes that Gollum has a role to play yet. Gandalf says it explicitly. My heart tells me that Gollum has some part to play yet, for good or ill, before this is over. But how can this be more than prophecy? How can there be a mechanism by which Gollum is preserved for his ultimate role? The answer may lie in Galadriel's unspoken blessing. By strengthening Frodo's natural mercy, by making it possible for him to repeatedly spare Gollum despite every rational reason to do otherwise, she ensures that the chain of events leading to the ring's destruction remains unbroken. Without Gollum alive at Mount Doom, the quest fails absolutely. With him, even Frodo's failure becomes paradoxically a success. This is theodicy through fantasy, the explanation of how good can emerge from apparent evil, how failure can become victory, how the weak can save what the strong cannot. And it requires not divine intervention that overrides free will, but grace that enables free will to choose better than it otherwise could. Frodo never speaks of such a blessing because he may not have fully understood it himself. He would have experienced it not as an external force, but as his own choice, his own compassion. The blessing's power lies precisely in its invisibility. It works not by compelling, but by enabling, not by forcing, but by sustaining. Consider how often Frodo wavers in his mercy toward Gollum, yet ultimately maintains it. Consider how Sam, who does not receive this blessing, finds it nearly impossible to show Gollum any kindness. Consider how even Gandalf, wise and powerful, admits he cannot guarantee he would have spared Gollum if the choice had been his. What Frodo accomplishes, the sustained, sacrificial mercy toward one who betrays him repeatedly, is genuinely extraordinary, and it saves the world. Galadriel, looking into possible futures with her mirror and her ancient sight, might have perceived this necessity. She might have understood that Frodo's quest would require not just courage, but a mercy beyond natural capacity, a compassion that could survive corruption. And in that private meeting, she might have invoked a blessing that would make such mercy possible. This would be her true gift, not the phial, precious as it was, but the invisible grace that made Frodo more than he could be on his own, that transformed his natural kindness into a supernatural mercy capable of bearing fruit even in the fires of Mount Doom. The phial lights external darkness. The blessing illuminates the darkness within, the moral shadows where choices must be made without clear guidance, where mercy and justice war against each other, and only grace can tip the balance toward compassion. If this gift was real, if Galadriel spoke such a blessing in that imagined night, then it would explain much that otherwise seems miraculous about Frodo's journey. And it would remain unwritten in the Red Book for the same reason Frodo never speaks of his private conversation with Galadriel. Some gifts are too sacred, too personal, too deeply woven into the fabric of one's choices to be articulated. To speak of them would be to diminish them, to make them seem like external forces rather than the transformation of one's own heart. Better to remain silent, to let the gift work invisibly, to allow future ages to wonder at Frodo's extraordinary mercy without ever quite understanding its source. If this gift was real, why did Frodo never speak of it? Now we turn to the question that has haunted this entire exploration. Why would Tolkien, having conceived of such a powerful and necessary moment, choose to leave it unwritten? Why does the Red Book, that supposedly complete chronicle of the War of the Ring, maintain its silence about a private meeting between Frodo and Galadriel? The answer lies in understanding Tolkien's philosophy of storytelling, his beliefs about truth and mythology, and his conviction that some moments become more powerful through suggestion than through explication. Tolkien was a scholar of ancient literature, particularly of Beowulf and the Norse sagas. He understood that the most enduring myths are not those that explain everything, but those that leave spaces for mystery, for wonder, for the reader's imagination to fill gaps in ways that speak to their own experience. The great myths work not through comprehensive cataloging, but through strategic omission, hinting at depths they never fully reveal. In his essay on fairy stories, Tolkien writes of the importance of what he calls subcreation, the building of secondary worlds that feel real precisely because they contain more than the story explicitly tells. A good secondary world, he argues, should feel as though it exists independently of the narrative, with vast histories and geographies that we glimpse only partially. This gives the world weight, makes it feel ancient and true rather than invented. The unwritten conversation between Frodo and Galadriel functions this way. By not writing it, by only hinting at its possibility through the emotional trajectory of Frodo's character and the mysterious intensity of his time in Lothlorien, Tolkien creates a space that feels weighted with significance. We sense that something profound occurred, but we are left to imagine what. And because each reader's imagination will fill that space differently, based on their own experiences of burden and compassion and grace, the moment becomes infinitely more powerful than any explicit description could achieve. There is also a theological dimension to Tolkien's silence. Throughout The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien deliberately underplays the religious and metaphysical elements that were so important to him personally. He does this not out of shame or secrecy, but because he believed that truth works best when embedded in story rather than preached through allegory. He wanted his mythology to be, as he said, consonant with Christian thought, but never explicitly Christian in its references. A scene in which Galadriel blesses Frodo, invoking grace that will sustain his mercy through the darkest trials, would come dangerously close to making the religious underpinnings too explicit. It would risk turning metaphor into allegory, suggestion into sermon. By leaving it unwritten, Tolkien allows the grace to work in the story as he believed it works in reality, invisibly, through apparent coincidence and character choice, perceptible only to those who look for it. Moreover, there is the question of Frodo's own privacy. The Red Book is supposedly written by Frodo himself, with contributions from Bilbo, Sam, and others. But throughout the text, we sense that Frodo is a private person, one who guards his deepest experiences from casual observation. He does not, for instance, describe in detail what it felt like to be stabbed by the Morgul blade, though that experience marked him forever. He does not elaborate on his internal struggle with the ring, giving us only glimpses of his growing obsession. Would such a person record his most intimate conversation with Galadriel, a moment of profound vulnerability and spiritual communion? Or would he keep it private, understanding that to write it down would be to profane it, to make public what was meant to remain sacred? The latter seems more consistent with Frodo's character. Some experiences are too personal, too painful, too holy to be shared even in a memoir. They belong to the realm of private memory, where they can be revisited in solitude but never adequately communicated to others. To attempt the communication would be to betray the experience itself. Tolkien understood this about his characters because he understood it about himself. His experiences in the trenches of World War I, the horror and loss he witnessed, were formative to everything he later wrote. Yet he almost never spoke of them directly. When friends or interviewers asked about the war, he deflected, suggesting that his experiences were private and that his fiction spoke more truly than any explicit account could. In the same way, Frodo's most transformative moments in Lothlorien, the conversations with Galadriel that shaped his capacity for mercy and endurance, might be indicated only through their effects, through the changed man who emerges from the Golden Wood, rather than through documentary record. There is also a literary technical reason for the omission. The Lord of the Rings is already a long book, dense with detail and digression. Tolkien was constantly battling his publishers about length, struggling to include everything he felt necessary while keeping the narrative manageable. He made countless cuts, removed entire chapters, compressed stories he would have loved to tell in full. A scene of intimate conversation between Frodo and Galadriel, if written with the depth it deserved, would require thousands of words. It would slow the narrative at a point where momentum is already deliberately slowed by the dreamlike quality of time in Lothlorien. Tolkien might have decided that the scene was important, even necessary. but that it worked better as an implied event than as an explicit one. By showing us Frodo before and after, by letting us see the change in him without detailing the exact conversation that catalyzed it, Tolkien allows the reader to participate in the creation of meaning. We become co-authors of that unwritten scene, each imagining it according to our own understanding of mercy, burden, and grace. Finally, there is the possibility that Tolkien tried to write the scene and found it impossible. Some moments resist articulation, no matter how skilled the writer. The meeting between these two characters, at this particular moment in their journeys, deals with questions too profound for easy language. What does it mean to bear unbearable burdens? How does one maintain compassion in the face of corruption? What is the relationship between free will and grace? These are questions that philosophy and theology have grappled with for millennia without resolution. To attempt answering them through a single conversation, no matter how eloquent, risks either oversimplifying profound mysteries or producing something so abstract it loses narrative power. Better, perhaps, to leave the conversation in shadow, to suggest its occurrence without detailing its contents, and to let the story itself, the choices Frodo makes, the mercy he maintains, the salvation that emerges from apparent failure, serve as the only answer these questions can receive. In the end, the scene remains unwritten not because it didn't happen, but because its truth is too large for words, too sacred for casual telling, too deeply personal to be shared. It exists in the gap between what Tolkien wrote and what we wish he had written, and in that gap, it becomes infinite, containing all possible conversations, all possible blessings, all possible transformations. The silence speaks louder than any words could. The absence becomes a presence. The unwritten becomes, paradoxically, the most important scene in the entire legendarium. When a story leaves a space unfilled, what grows in its shadow? We come now to the end of our journey through the unwritten lore, to the moment where we must ask what remains after we have explored this absent scene, after we have imagined the conversation Tolkien never penned, after we have traced its invisible influence through the quest and its ultimate conclusion. What does it mean that this scene exists only in potentiality, never in actuality? And what does that tell us about the nature of story, memory, and the quiet heroism that saves worlds? Frodo carries Galadriel's light, the tangible light of the File and the intangible light of her blessing, through every dark place of his journey. When he and Sam stand at the crossroads, debating which path to take, it is the quality of mercy strengthened in Lothlorien that allows Frodo to continue trusting Gollum despite mounting evidence of treachery. When he lies poisoned and paralyzed in Shelob's lair, the File blazes in Sam's hand, driving back the ancient evil. When he climbs the slopes of Mount Doom, every step in agony, it is the memory of being truly seen, of Galadriel bearing witness to his struggle. That gives him strength to continue. But these connections are never made explicit in the text. Tolkien does not pause to remind us, this mercy comes from Galadriel's blessing, or this strength flows from their conversation in the glade. Instead, we see only Frodo's choices, Frodo's character, Frodo's inexplicable capacity to remain compassionate even as the ring devours his hope. This is how grace works in Tolkien's world, quietly, through apparent coincidence, through choices that seem to emerge from character, but which are mysteriously enabled by forces beyond the individual. It is providence without predestination, divine involvement without violation of free will. Galadriel's blessing, if it exists, does not compel Frodo to show mercy. It simply makes it possible for him to do so when he otherwise could not. And in the end, on Mount Doom, when Frodo fails and claims the ring, even this failure is encompassed by grace. Gollum's survival, the result of Frodo's repeated mercy, becomes the mechanism of salvation. The quest succeeds not through Frodo's strength, but through his earlier compassion, through choices made in darkness without any certainty they would matter. This is eucatastrophe in its purest form, the sudden turn from despair to joy, from failure to victory, from death to life. And it is made possible by a conversation that may never have happened, a blessing that was never spoken, a grace that worked invisibly through every dark choice and desperate hour. After the ring is destroyed and the quest complete, Frodo returns to the Shire changed. The wound from the Morgul blade never fully heals. The spiritual damage from bearing the ring remains. He cannot find peace in the place he fought so hard to save. This is the tragedy that Galadriel foresaw and warned him about, the cost of victory, the price of mercy, the reality that some burdens leave permanent marks on those who bear them. Yet when Frodo finally sails into the west, when he boards the white ship and departs Middle-earth forever, he sails toward Galadriel. She will be there to greet him, having passed her own test and earned her return to Valinor. The meeting in Lothlorien, spoken or unspoken, becomes a promise finally fulfilled. I will be waiting in the west to welcome you home. There is a profound beauty in this reunion. The two who shared the burden of resisting the ring, who understood each other across vast gulfs of experience and age, will meet again in a land untouched by shadow. What was begun in moonlight under the Melian will find its completion in the eternal light of the undying lands. The conversation that was too heavy to witness will continue where all weights are lifted, where all wounds heal, where the mercy that saved the world can finally rest. This is why the scene in Lothlorien remains unwritten, because its true conclusion lies beyond the borders of Middle-earth, beyond the pages of the Red Book, in a place where stories do not end but transform into something that transcends narrative altogether. For those of us who remain behind, reading and rereading Tolkien's work, searching for the patterns hidden in his silences, the unwritten scene becomes a kind of sacred text. We return to it not because we can read it, but because we cannot. We return to the space it occupies, the gap in the narrative where something profound occurred, and we fill that space with our own experiences of burden, mercy, grace, and witness. Everyone who carries a burden too heavy for their strength, everyone who has had to show mercy when mercy seemed folly, everyone who has felt seen and understood in their darkest hour, each of us writes our own version of that scene. Frodo becomes us, and we become Frodo. Galadriel becomes the voice of every mentor, every wise friend, every presence that sustained us when we could not sustain ourselves. This is the genius of Tolkien's omission. By not writing the scene, he makes it universal. By leaving it in shadow, he allows it to speak to each reader differently, meeting us where we are, addressing our particular struggles and griefs and hopes. The unwritten becomes infinitely written, authored anew by every heart that recognizes itself in Frodo's burden and Galadriel's blessing. Consider the lonely reader who finds in Frodo's story permission to continue carrying their own impossible burden. Consider the one who discovers in Galadriel's refusal of the ring the courage to turn away from their own temptations. Consider the person who learns from Frodo's mercy toward Gollum that compassion is not weakness, but the strength that ultimately saves. For each of these readers, the unwritten scene exists in a different form, speaks different words, offers different comfort. Yet all are true, all are valid, all are glimpses of the same underlying reality. This is what remains after all that is lost. The story itself, endlessly generative, eternally relevant, speaking across decades and centuries to each new generation of readers who carry their own rings, who face their own Mount Dooms, who need to know that someone understands. The golden leaves of Lothlorien fall and are renewed, season after season in Tolkien's imagined world. The light of Eärendil's star shines on, never dimming, a permanent fixture in the sky of Middle-earth. And the conversation between Frodo and Galadriel continues in the hearts of readers, unwritten but not unheard, unrecorded but not forgotten. In the end, perhaps the most important stories are those that remain untold. Not because they didn't happen, but because their truth is too large to be contained in any single telling. They exist instead in the space between words, in the silence between chapters, in the darkness illuminated by starlight and the light of faithful hearts. Frodo walked into shadow carrying a burden that broke him, showed mercy that seemed foolish, and through that mercy saved the world he could not save through strength. Galadriel stood at the edge of ultimate power, saw what she would become, and chose diminishment instead of dominion. These truths we know because Tolkien wrote them. But what passed between them in the quiet hours under the Melian, when two souls who had resisted the same temptation shared their fears and hopes, their wisdom and wounds, that remains in shadow, as perhaps it should. For some conversations are too holy for daylight, too profound for casual speech, too personal to be witnessed by any but the stars. And yet we sense its presence nonetheless. We feel its weight in every choice Frodo makes thereafter, every moment of mercy he maintains, every step he takes toward the fire that will destroy the ring and nearly destroy him. We see its echo in Galadriel's eyes when she stands at the Grey Havens and welcomes the wounded ring-bearer aboard the White Ship, fulfilling the promise made in a glade in Lothlorien. "I will be waiting to welcome you home." The scene was never written, the conversation never recorded, the blessing never explicitly spoken, and yet it changes everything. Perhaps the meeting never occurred in words, but in the quiet between two hearts that bore the fate of the world, it shone brighter than the file of starlight itself. Dear listener, this story ends, but many await. Subscribe so no tale escapes you.